Hey, it's Ryan with an updated fishing report for Big Stone Lake. It's late April and water temps have crept up into the lower 50s. We'll get started by going over a couple of highlights from the last couple of weeks out here. Number one is water levels are back up to what I would say is normal for Big Stone in the spring. So it's a little bit above average summer pool. We're just a few inches above that. So pretty normal for springtime out here. We have a little more precipitation in the forecast. I don't suspect things will change too much as far as water levels, but we're definitely back to where we should be, and that's a good thing. The second of which is over the last week we've had a full moon, and that has a lot of effect on the fish. We definitely have three different bites going on Big Stone. We have a panfish, a bass, and a walleye bite going on this spring, but the full moon has definitely had the biggest effect on the walleyes, and that's where we're going to get started. This last week with the full moon, the walleyes have been spawning like crazy. At this point today, we're getting towards the tail end of that. There's still going to be a few fish on those spawning reefs, but I would say the bulk of that is now behind us. And that's a great thing, because what that's going to mean is much improved fishing over the next few weeks and definitely well into June. There's a few techniques that are my favorites for spring walleyes on Big Stone. Number one is going to be a jig and a minnow. It's just the most consistent producer, especially in early spring out here. There's a lot of different jigs and minnows a guy can use, but the overall staple is just a little short shank jig in a 1/16 to 1/8 of an ounce. Generally what I'm doing is when I'm fishing a jig and a minnow on Big Stone, I'm in about 3 to 6 feet of water, and I'm either dragging it across the bottom if there's not too much scum on the bottom and I can get away with it, or I'm doing light hops, just gently hopping it over the bottom, lifting it up, letting it fall. Those are a couple of great techniques for catching walleyes. They work every year, day in, day out. It's the most consistent producer, especially in early spring. Second technique that I really like is just a little paddle tail swim bait. 1/4 inch minnow colored Kitech Easy Shiner. I should say a 4-inch Kitech Easy Shiner in a minnow color with about an 1/8 to a 1/4 ounce jig depending on the depth you're fishing. If you're out by the main break in that 7, 8, 9 foot of water range on a cold front day, you know, that 1/4 ounce might be the way to go. If you're coming in shallower, or if you're fishing from shore in the evening, an 1/8 of an ounce a lot of times allows you to slow that bait down enough to get more bites. Lastly is crankbaits. You know, you can use the little shallow running stick baits, especially if you're casting up into shorelines. As we get later into May, what you'll see is on warm days, those walleyes will get really shallow. They'll go up into that 1, 2, 3 foot of water range. So getting right up tight to the bank is a great way of catching them. When you're in real shallow water, the little stick baits work well, like the original floating Rapalas, Thunder Sticks, Husky Jerks, that sort of thing. If you're in a little bit deeper water, that 2 to 4 foot of water range, then what I'll do a lot of times is use a shallow running shad wrap or a shallow running flicker shad. The colors I like are just going to be something that's black or blue and silver, or I'll use a fire tiger if the water is really stirred up. Those three techniques are sure to catch you walleyes throughout the month of May and definitely well into the month of June out here. Next is the panfish bite, and I have definitely seen a bump in the crappies over the last few days on Big Stone. We've been encountering a fish here and there, but the last couple of days it's been really good. And there's a couple of techniques that work really well for crappies. The tried and true staple is just a crappie minnow and a plain hook, or a crappie minnow and a flu under a bobber. You can't go wrong with that. It's just a consistent producer no matter where you go at almost any time of year. The one that we've been doing in my boat that's been working really well is just a little paddle tail minnow. We've been using a 3-inch Kitech Easy Shiner. It's a very, very small 3-inch paddle tail minnow, but we've been putting that on a 1/16 ounce jig, 4-pound test line. Cast it out, reel it in slow, nice and easy. The crappies have been hammering it. A lot of times you find it at the back of their throat. So they've been aggressive, especially on warm days. I've noticed a lot of those panfish have been sitting out in the basin close to the main break, but definitely when we have a warm afternoon, you'll see a bump of fish move up into the shallows in that 4 to 5 foot of water range. Lastly is the bass, and Big Stone has really gained a reputation as being an incredible bass fishery. What I would say is we are still in what I would consider an ice out pattern, 40-degree water pattern. So my best techniques have been on warm afternoons, just a flat-sided shallow crankbait up in about 3-4 foot of water. Cast it out, reel it in slow, let it tick bottom. You'll find massive schools of bass in warm pockets of water in the shallows. But you need a warm day for that. You kind of need the right conditions. A warm afternoon is ideal for it. When you're casting those little crankbaits, just a blue and silver or a fire tiger or a perch or panfish pattern, those are all colors that'll work, but a lot of times you're going to find that it's a sunny day and that little blue and silver minnow works best because I think it just mimics a lot of the bait that's up there. There's a lot of shiners that are moving up into the shallows as well. The second pattern that works well is when you don't have warming trends, when you're dealing with a cold front or you're dealing with a cool morning. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll fall back to the main break, stuff that's in that 6-7 foot of water range, maybe that 5-6-7-8 foot of water range. But jerkbaits have been working really well for me on heavy structure on that main break. Large rocks on the main break, jerkbaits fished at a pretty steady pace is what's been working best. I wouldn't say long pauses. I've definitely noticed days where a long pause will scare the fish away. So just maintain a consistent pace with your jerkbait. I prefer the shallow running jerkbaits when I can get away with it, especially when the water's clearer, or if I'm just trying to cover water, I like the action of them better. But if you're around a specific boulder or a really specific piece of structure, I always keep a deep running jerkbait handy so I can get down to it really quick and fish one specific area very well. So those two jerkbaits, they work great. I either use a chrome pattern jerkbait on a sunny day or I use a white one under pretty much any other conditions. But those are the colors I go with: 100, 110 size. Keep a shallow runner handy and a deep runner handy. Use those when the water temps aren't coming up. Lastly is the bass bite is going to take off here very quickly. We are right on the edge of the pre-spawn bite, and that is the big draw to Big Stone Lake. If you're looking for big fish, there is no better time to be on Big Stone than the pre-spawn. There's a couple reasons for that. One is the fish are arguably at their biggest during pre-spawn. But second is the weeds aren't too much of a factor at this time. So the fish are very concentrated into very small and predictable areas during the pre-spawn. So not only can you run into giant bass on Big Stone in the spring during the pre-spawn period, but some days you can run into numbers of them. So if you're looking for big fish, the next few weeks are going to be the best time of the year to be out here. During the pre-spawn, there's a couple techniques that really stand out to me. I like moving baits. You know, moving baits are just a great way to cover water and find fish on Big Stone. One of my favorites is a chatterbait, just a green pumpkin chatterbait. But a swim jig also does a very good job of that. The cool thing about a swim jig is you can beat the bank with a swim jig. You can use one bait and it'll cover everything from laydowns to boulders to simply just casting and winding and covering water. The next thing that I like to keep on the deck is just a flipping jig. And a lot of guys will opt for a Texas rig. I prefer jigs. But the flipping jig with just a crawfish trailer, that's something I keep handy when there's a specific dock or a specific boulder or a really gnarly laydown that I find. Something where I just want it to be a little bit more weedless than a swim jig. So keep that flipping jig handy for when you find a specific instance on the bank or a specific boulder that you want to cover real well. Those are the baits I use during the pre-spawn. I'll elaborate on that later. I've got other videos for those as well. But it's going to get a lot better out here on Big Stone over the next few weeks. May is the time to be here. So good luck fishing. Hopefully these tips help you out, and have a great weekend.